So I've been playing Silent Hill Homecoming.
This video game has made me so angry!
While I feel that shit can be fun for comedy's sake when done right, I don't typically like starting my reviews off with any inherent tone or forward bias, especially on the negative end of the opinion spectrum. You see, in my eyes, that shit breeds instant hostility between you and whoever's watching or reading your coverage. Even though, had you eased them into it a wee little bit, all lubed up and raring to go, they may very well have been super susceptible to your point of view, or have even felt the same right from the outset. Though, that said, however, perhaps, I also can't deny the waves of negativity surrounding Silent Hill Homecoming for me. All the reviews I've seen from those who I trust mostly were quite explicitly calling it one of, if not the worst Silent Hill game ever, and even my favorite internet nice boys The Best Friends Play couldn't make me sit through this shit regardless of their commentary. So, my expectations are pretty fucking dire, so surely, all we can do from here is go up. Right? Once upon a time, there was a boy called Alex. He had visions of children, bad voice acting, awkward PS3 cutscenes, and Silent Hill 2. Awoken in a hospital of some sort, he immediately realizes his disposition is positioned within the town of Silent Hill, the town where he lived, as the map so elegantly tells you. But everyone else has gone missing, and also monsters and mists. And thusly, with melee weapons held high, Alex ventures forth, encountering all manner of but also, this is a survival horror game after all, you guys. You get the puzzles, the riddles, the keypads, and the big maps with the locked doors and the linear progression without backtracking, and melee combat with combo system. Wait, what? So the gameplay in Home4 has seemed somewhat of a modernized revamp. The camera, for example, is now just kind of behind you, putting you square in the middle at all times, obstructing view of the still very narrow areas and locations. And the inventory is now weirdly Metal Gear-like, in that you bring up the weapons menu with the right trigger and the items menu with the left trigger, forcing you to hold shit down as you browse, allowing you to conveniently use items by letting go and leaving cursor, meaning that when you just pop the boy open to check your health bar while walking, you will also accidentally use some rare-ass healing item. Which is fucking rich as well, considering that your non-rare-ass healing items have their own dedicated buttons, showing that they were well aware of how shitty this shit be, but simply chose not to fix it properly. And just overall, the game is structurally very linear now. Sure, the traditional map screens still look the same, though they also mysteriously transform into an evil map when you otherworld, which is fucking dumb. But the game tends to now graciously guide you along a path rather than letting you explore shit freely. In this game's hotel/big building stage, for example, because you know, you gotta have one of those every fucking time. You don't get to maintenance stairway and elevator your way about the place, solving puzzles and riddles that spread multiple layers in a fascinating and cleverly designed explorative fashion, as you instead are forced down a path of carefully selected locked doors and caved-in staircases that prohibit you from going anywhere the game doesn't want you to go. And so, as a result, the puzzles have also been simplified somewhat while still echoing what made the puzzles in the OG, being riddles and the old Resi-style amulet bangle-banger. The former are still intact for the most part though, a fair bit easier due to the more obvious nature of the riddle writing, which is either good or bad depending on how you felt about them in the first place, but the latter are more or less non-existent now because of the linearity. Fixing a radio by needing to find 3 wires won't see you scouring the entire building, it just sees you walking over next door because that was the only place one could go. It's awesome. Very engaging. Oh, and it also has what I now consider to be the worst puzzle ever designed. Seriously, if you ever end up playing this, don't fucking touch it! Open up a walkthrough and let yourself get guided instead. You can easily spend hours on this fucker, as it is a slidey puzzle with irregularly sized slideys, thus not having the ability to rotate the slideys to gain solid ground of slidey understanding. making it very possible to fuck yourself proper, and resetting the damn thing means having to leave the attic with loading screen, leave the house with loading screen, leave the garden with an even longer loading screen, only to then have to turn around and suffer the same shit on your way back up, perhaps also noticing that the cutscenes and item replacements have also been reset for whatever fucking reason. Shit's beyond borked. But, yeah. Speaking of borked, by far the biggest revamp to be found in Homecoming is the combat. Rather than grabbing pipe, holding down button, and mindlessly bashing square to slam shit to bits, you now pick up a pipe, hold down the shoulder button, and use a multitude of different attack types like fast hits, strong hits, charged hits, and roll dodges without iframes that make combos happen. I will say, right off the bat, that I do appreciate the
stab him in the tease
approach to a novel degree, but I can't help but compare it to the infinitely more satisfying and feel a bit disappointed. Similarly, while it does have really janky looking finisher animations, something about how you aggressively kick things with your big dumb heather boots was also a lot more fun. The animation and the feel of the combat match what your character was going through. Grossed out, fearing for their lives, and pretty much feeling fucking fed up with the whole goddamn situation. Whereas Alex doesn't seem to emote or make any sounds, leaving you with the empty soundscapes of gross, meaty, slicey, stitchy, knifey sounds and nothing much else. Also, as you can see, the camera gets all up close and personal as they expect you to do timed dodges, combos, and parries. Which, I mean, already there's something to be said here about empowerment in horror, though that shit is basic ass bitch and I won't say it, but even if I would, I'd still counter it by saying that the combat in Homecoming doesn't empower shit, as it's just too darn bad and janky all round. You see, the true crux of the combat here revolves around either getting lucky enough to be able to stunlock them, or being unlucky enough to have them stunlock you. And as I said, the dodging don't have no iframes. I imagine that that's because the game has very few frames to go around in the first place. Not to mention the still very Silent Hill-ish area constructions with the small rooms, tight hallways, and wee cubbyholes, now made unnavigationable by the change in perspective. Just walking around alone can already be a tad awkward, but then also enemies. Naturally, they kept around the limited ammo and health items thing too, while not taking into account how that don't work in a game with such a large combat-heavy focus, where running away is rarely an option and avoiding damage is a fuck. All due to the bad dodging and the messed up frame rate, but then they also made the genius decision to include enemies that are best fought with specific weapons and having the gall to include guns into that, resulting in situations where you're forced to deal with like two dudes within a small room best taken out with shotgun with Naya shotgun ammo in sight and fuck for health items due to you using them on accident all the goddamn time. Shit sucks ass. I'm gonna be frank. Sure, on paper these are all interesting attempts, but the way things come together in this horribly janky and unbalanced manner is entirely and grossly broken, which isn't even mentioning the boss fights that are just and also the attacks that are often telegraphed quite badly, what with the Jacob's Ladder-esque animation jitter still hanging around. It is quite bad. So, what's left then? I mean, surely the atmosphere and story pull things together in that classic Team Silent fashion. Well, no. I guess almost at times, kind of, but generally also just no in most areas. It's complicated, I guess. For one, as I'm sure you've noticed, like 90% of the game is without color. Lifeless, undetailed, samey-gray levels, with the fog used only as an excuse to hide how shitty everything looks. Still, some of the otherworld bits look okay. Even some parts of the town look decent when you go into first person and situate your ass in a position where you can mimic the classic camera angles, leading me to think that maybe some of these places were designed with actual angles in mind, or at the very least just made without consideration for how hard to navigate these places would be in third person. Cause like, the type of shots what I managed to get here in terms of lighting, object placement, shadow rendering, and general composition look almost too deliberate for one to just callously walk through. Filter-wise, shit also looks neat, as they've taken to using jitter and flicker over just grain, which gives off a really cool effect when paired with the bright red lighting and rusty textures. And while there isn't any gore other than just the same fucking corpse used time and time again, the big fans, barbed wires, and impossible spaces are all present and accounted for, and used to a similar effect. It's just that, literally all of the otherworld sections are just nothing but rust. You won't find any pulsating rapey cupboards, traumatizing mirror rooms, or just really anything super imaginative here. In fact, looking at how shit transitions and how Pinhead casually jogs about the place for no reason, and how there's goofy cult goons that ruin the mood severely, I think that they may have actually taken after the movie more so than any of the available games. Which, I mean, that movie dumb, but I do dig it, and it is what also got me into Silent Hill in the first place. Not to mention how inexplicably generic and western this game's marketing is, I'm gonna go on a limb and say that they most certainly were banking on the movie crowd getting into this, which I don't even mind considering that would have brought in more people to the series as a whole, just like how the movie did. So, while it might not hold a candle to any of the games prior, I could see this maybe working as a gateway drug in a way. You know, if the game was actually good or scary in the first place. There's this thing in Team Silent's unique brand of horror called subtlety, using implication and thought manipulation over straight up. For instance, in Silent Hill 2, there's this scene in the moth room, where James had to grab a thing out of a hole, which goes something like this. Nothing really happens, but it sure shit feels like it did, right? It leaves it open for you to ponder, to linger on the implications of what you just saw, and thus putting you on edge for the time being. But in Homecoming, shit be all like, and then they do it again later. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that QTEs or jump scares are bad and that they don't have any place in horror, as one just has to look at RE4 to see that they clearly do, but inducing a panic wasn't what Silent Hill 2 scenes did. As you see, panic doesn't last. Sure, for like a split second, you'll be all like, oh no, fuck this. But once that moment passes, you wipe the sweat from your bellend and move on, only to put it past you as a mere spoopy moment. It doesn't really affect you past the point of its occurrence, is what I'm saying. Which, I mean, yeah, works fine for popcorn horror where no one really wants to be fucked with and just wants some quick scares as an excuse to grope titty, but it doesn't work in a game that otherwise still tries to fuck with your brain by being rather eerie and off-putting and densely oppressive. Which it is too. Yamaoka still did the OST for this one, and he did so good. Foregoing any and all catchy melody and seemingly actually interpreting the grey moody visuals through a very drone-heavy omnipresent soundscape that does wonders to elevate the game's immersion factor. And hey, while the mixing and mastering is downright awful, the sound design itself is still pretty good too. Heavy reused though it may seem. Like, I don't know, something about having to slice through a giant fleshy meat wall only to have to squeeze on through its toothy pulsating interior is pretty fucking off-putting. It's cool. I'll remember that, just like I'll remember this. By far, the worst thing though is the lack of contrasts and colors and simple design elegance all around. As I said, the combat's bad, and puzzles are bad, and game linear, but even still it manages to be profoundly confusing due to how samey and washed out everything looks. The areas do feel designed with angles in mind, so shit's tight and often forces the camera into odd positions. But then there's also the fog of war being far too dense, even obscuring shit indoors where the tight corridors are much more prevalent too, and just imagine having to look for knee-high crawl spaces or wall-colored doors within such a setting. It just doesn't work. Like, check out this bit for example. This is door. Not wall, but door. The camera, the lighting, your attention being drawn to the pedestals on either side, and the fact that all of the walls in this room look exactly the same what lead you to believe that it is wall, but it is not wall, it is door. One pretty fucking crucial for progression as well, and to pour insult over an open fuck, that door leads to this room, a room that is small, tiny, and has this huge fucking colorful desk with a bright light in it demanding your attention. So surely there would have to be a note or an item there, right? There isn't. I just can't see this as anything other than straight up bad design. It goes against anything that you would instinctively think, and not in a clever, tricky kind of way either. It just sucks. And of course, there's many more instances like it just as well. So Alex is a war boy with war boy problems. He has traumatic flashbacks, ugly facial animations, and a hefty fucking case of Muraca in his bedroom. His brother also has gone missing, as has his dad, and his mom clearly has seen better days.
Mom. Mom.
Alex. What are you doing here?
I like this scene. Mom's acting is pretty good, the music is fitting, and the cinematography is very much in line with the slow looming style as seen in 2 and 3. And it actually got me engaged too, pondering about which angle they were going to take here. Like, is Alex actually dead, like the protag in that One New Order song? Or is his brother even real? Is he his brother, just playing make-believe, hence why you keep finding kitty drawings and shit? Just kids pretending to play soldier, but then also traumatized or whatever because bad dad? Shit like that. I was into it. Only, sadly, I soon realized that all of that interesting story stuff was made up by me. The game doesn't really dig into any of these territories and basically just boils down to my family was involved with the cult. Not to spoil, obviously, but all character interactions were also just surprisingly normal. Just casually hanging around, discussing the weather with Lady while the road like 2 meters away has fucking collapsed into the all-encompassing abyss. People also just straight up acknowledge seeing this too, so there's no perception fuckery like Silent Hill 2 did. And dudes even straight up complain about the monsters and stuff, including Alex. No one really seems to care. There's no heightened emotions. Motherfuckers just be like, "Welp, whoop-de-doo. I guess the cops don't like these dogs either." Like, fuck off. That shit sucks. Not to mention how dumb things also get with scenes like the power drill to the knee and the fucking cult goons fucking about the place, and whether or not if this honors Silent Hill's legacy and follows the rules set by the cult is not something I care about at all. That shit's for nerds and is kinda dumb already, let's be real. But tonally, the older games made it work, by either not showing a lot and leaving you to ponder, or just by laying down some very good fucking writing and characters making it a non-issue. But here, the writing is just so flaccid and boring and generic that it stands out to such a degree that the entire suspending of disbeliefs falls completely flat. Thus, leading me to the conclusion that this game, bad. It has its moments and a lot of neat ideas on paper, but the execution of it all leaves a metric fuck ton to be desired. In a way, I struggle to be super negative, and I am willing to highlight that I wasn't really bored or frustrated during most of it, but then it did also really fall apart as it went on, and just has too many bad design choices for me to ignore them in good conscience. The negatives heavily outweigh the positives in this case, thus putting it just a smidge below mediocre in my opinion. How very, very sad indeed.